It was winter, and the school season was about to end to give way to the long-awaited Christmas holidays. Liam, like all the children in his class, couldn't contain his excitement and nerves to know what Santa Claus would give him that year. The news had recently broken that Santa had gotten married and that he shared the task of bringing gifts to all the children in the world with his wife, Mrs. Claus. Everyone was talking excitedly about the toys they wanted to ask their wife for. Everyone except Robert, who had completely changed his attitude since last Christmas. Robert had lived in an orphanage since his parents abandoned him on Christmas Eve the previous year. He firmly maintained that his parents would never have left him alone, and that Mrs. Claus had punished him for his bad behavior by taking his parents away from him. Liam had always been intrigued by what had happened to Robert and finally dared to ask because no one else seemed interested. Robert, looking at the ground with a dissatisfied expression, confessed that Mrs. Claus was not the one everyone thought she was. He claimed to know important secrets, but no one was willing to listen to him. He expressed his hope that no other child would have to experience what had happened to him, and hoped that one day the truth would come out and Santa's wife would be arrested. Liam felt a little uncomfortable and wanted to end the conversation, which seemed a bit delirious. He expressed his sadness for everything Robert had experienced and wished him a happy holiday. Afterwards, he went to where they had the coats to go home. Before he left, Robert stopped him by grabbing his hand. He fixed his eyes intensely on him and said, "Be a good boy." Liam stood still for a few seconds, pondering, and finally nodded his head. His friend let go of his hand and turned his gaze to the ground. For Liam, Christmas represented his favorite times. Although summer had its fun with longer vacations and warm weather to enjoy the beach, Liam had a special affection for Christmas, as it was the time when he could finally reunite with his father. The man spent most of the year working in Europe, which left the little boy living a lot of time alone with his mother. When the woman was at work, he sometimes had to stay with his grandmother, who lived a short distance from their house. That day, at the end of classes, his father had just arrived and was waiting for him with open arms at the school door. Liam couldn't wait to go to the park to play, like they used to do every Friday after school. However, his father came up with the idea of taking advantage of the day to go to the mall and do some Christmas shopping. Liam wasn't thrilled with the idea and started screaming and crying, hoping they would change their minds. His parents told him that it was necessary to make those purchases because they needed some things for Christmas dinner. And there he could have fun choosing decorations for the tree. The boy, angry, expressed his hatred towards Christmas and towards them for forcing him to go shopping. The mother, with an angry expression, scolded him for his words and asked him to apologize to both her and his father. However, Liam, crossing his arms and without saying a word, simply got into the car in silence. When they arrived at the mall, it was decorated with Christmas lights and decorations. In the distance, a long line of children could be seen stretching from the main entrance. It was Santa Claus and his wife, who were sitting on two majestic thrones, posing for photos with the little ones and allowing them to sit on their laps to express their wishes for Christmas gifts. Liam's mother changed her angry expression, tried to calm the situation, and proposed to Liam that they could go visit Santa Claus together. The little boy quickly changed his attitude and nodded. He was eager to tell Santa that he wanted the remote control car he had been eyeing in the toy store for months. The line was organized in a unique way until it reached the thrones, where it was then divided into two. Some sat with Santa Claus and others with Mrs. Claus. Liam was nervous as ever. He longed for it to be his turn to sit on Santa's lap, because throughout his life he had asked him for gifts and he had always brought him everything he wanted. Unfortunately, it was Mrs. Claus' turn. He remained motionless, waiting for another child to decide to go with her. However, Mrs. Claus began calling him and beckoning him to come closer. His mother gently nudged him forward and assured him that he shouldn't be afraid, that it was okay to make a change. Although he was not entirely happy with the idea, Liam approached timidly. Once sitting on her lap, Mrs. Claus commented that he looked like a very good boy. She asked him to smile for the photo and managed to get a laugh with some tickles on his belly. The mother took advantage of the moment to take the photo and mentioned, "Well, today wasn't his best behaved day, was it?" As she let out a small smile and winked at her son. Liam also gave a small laugh and lowered his head. After this, Mrs. Claus's face suddenly changed expression. She looked at the boy and asked if that was true. He looked at his parents and then looked down, nodding sheepishly. Then Mrs. Claus warned him that if he wasn't good to his parents, he didn't deserve to have them, and she would deprive him of them and would only give him coal. Liam thought for a moment and asked, "Why charcoal?" At that moment, his father intervened and explained that he had heard of that tradition in other places in the world where children also received gifts from 3 men riding camels at Christmas. These 3 men were known as the 3 wise men, and children who misbehaved were given coal instead of toys. After leaving there, Liam realized that he hadn't even had a chance to tell Mrs. Claus what he wanted for Christmas. However, he didn't want to return because he hadn't liked that lady at all. The Christmas holidays had only begun and they were already as exciting and wonderful as he had wanted them to be. The little boy delighted in sweets, especially those that his grandmother prepared, such as the elf-shaped cookies that she used to make during the Christmas season. Additionally, he enjoyed Christmas movie nights with his parents, a time he looked forward to all year long to share with his family. The day before Christmas, Liam and his parents dedicated themselves to decorating the tree, the house, and preparing dinner. Several relatives had gone to spend the night with them, and he had had a great time playing with his cousins. The atmosphere was full of laughter and joy until it was time to go to bed. They said goodbye to the family members who were returning home to sleep while the magic of Christmas took place. Liam's parents accompanied the little boy to his room, but he complained. He didn't want to leave yet because this was one of the happiest nights of the year and he never wanted it to end. His parents reminded him that he should go to bed early, otherwise Santa Claus and his wife would not be able to give him his presents that night. The parents went up the stairs to their bedrooms, but as they ascended, Liam noticed a shadow crossing quickly. He ran down the stairs to find out what he had seen, but found no trace. Suddenly, he saw a red shadow through the window again. He stared at the glass until he could make out the face of Mrs. Claus, who gave him a wicked smile and placed a finger on her lips, signaling him to remain silent. Terrified, Liam screamed for his parents to come down, but when they came running and the little boy pointed in the window, there was nothing there. Liam's parents insisted that it was too late to play and ordered him to go to sleep. The little boy obeyed and got under the covers quickly. He was sweating and couldn't get Mrs. Claus's evil gaze out of his head. He tossed and turned in bed, overwhelmed by his thoughts, until he finally fell asleep, exhausted by fatigue. The next morning, Liam woke up and ran up. The day didn't frighten him like the night. He decided to go to his parents' room, although something seemed strange to him. Usually, his parents were the ones who woke him up because they always had their coffee very early. But that day had not been like that. When he opened the door to his parents' room, he realized they weren't there. Worry began to invade him, and he quickly went out into the hallway. But there, he smelled the aroma of the freshly brewed coffee that his mother prepared every morning, which gave him some peace of mind. He calmly descended the stairs, expecting to find his parents in the kitchen, but to his surprise, there was no one. Just 2 cups of coffee on the counter. It seemed strange to him, but he didn't get too upset. He remembered that sometimes they went to look for his grandmother at her house so that she could join the celebration and open the gifts together. When he reached the tree, he got another big surprise. There was only one gift. Liam, feeling sad, waited for his parents to return before opening it. He knew he hadn't been a bad child. He just had his moments of temper tantrums like anyone else. After waiting patiently for 2 long hours with no one showing up, curiosity began to agitate Liam. He thought that the gift laying under the tree might be the only thing that Santa Claus or his wife had left him. Without further delay, he tore the wrapping paper and found that there were only a few pieces of coal inside. Liam burst into tears, overwhelmed by the thought that, just as Mrs. Claus said the mole had warned, he only deserved coal and she had taken his parents. He had never left home alone, much less left his street. However, he felt desperate and decided to walk to his grandmother's house. She lived about a 20-minute walk away, and he knew the way from going there many times with his parents. In his mind, he was recreating everything he would say to them for giving him that scare and leaving him alone on such a special day. However, when he got there, he didn't find anyone either. It seemed that his grandmother wasn't at home, because she didn't answer it when he pressed the doorbell, and his parents' car wasn't in sight either. With a feeling of desolation, Liam returned home and began walking back. Suddenly, the words of that boy from school, Robert, flooded his mind. He changed his course and headed towards the orphanage. He was the only person who could have information about what had happened. When he got there, the workers informed him that Robert had escaped days ago and that they didn't know his whereabouts. Liam, desperate, needed some clue to know where he was. So he decided to make up an excuse to get the workers to let him into his room. He told them that Robert had kept a book of his from school and that he needed it to be able to do his vacation homework. He said it would only take him a minute to go get it because he knew where he kept it. In that way, the workers allowed him to go. When he entered the room, he noticed that his friend's mattress was raised slightly. He approached and discovered his diary. In it, Robert wrote that he had finally discovered Mrs. Claus's whereabouts and had drawn a map pointing to an entrance to a cave in the woods behind Liam's house. The boy ran at full speed back to his house and headed to the back of his garden. There, he looked closely at the ground and noticed some fine wheel tracks heading towards the forest. Following the markings, he reached the entrance to the cave that Robert had marked in his drawing and entered without a second thought. Following the route, Liam entered a series of underground galleries, and at the end of the path, he came across a wooden cart that explained the marks on the ground. Next to it, there was a small container that contained his parents' belongings, as well as other objects that were unknown to him. He advanced with caution and came across a horrifying scene. Mrs. Claus was leading an army of elves who were mutilating the people trapped in that place, cutting off their fingers and toes. The amputated fingers were thrown into a burning oven. The rest of the bodies were pierced by hooks and hung by chains to serve as food for Santa's reindeer. There was nothing cute or funny about reindeer. They had sharp teeth, red eyes, and blood-stained snouts. With their mouths, they tore the skin of the corpses and of those who had not yet died, but who screamed in pain while the fierce animals dismembered their intestines without mercy. Mrs. Claus supervised the elves, assigning tasks and deciding where to place victims, while laughing from a high throne in the cave. The elves sung as they threw people's fingers into the oven. In the middle of this nightmare, one of the elves looked towards where Liam was. The little boy quickly escaped in search of a place to hide. When he thought he was safe, he looked at what appeared to be the end of the oven, watching the charred pieces of fingers fall into a box. The boy burst into tears again and ran outside. He arrived home feeling like he had nowhere to go. It was then that he realized that the box he had found under the tree was the same one at the end of the oven, and that the blocks of charcoal were the charred remains of his parents' fingers. Desperate, he ran back to the orphanage to tell what he had seen. However, when they returned to look for the cave, it had disappeared. Robert's diary had fallen during his escape, and there was no longer a trace of the footprints on the ground. Eventually, Liam ended up living in the orphanage. In class, he sat in the place Robert usually occupied, looking down like the previous boy used to do. He could no longer look at his grandmother's cookies in the shape of elves without remembering them singing while committing such atrocities. He couldn't help but think that Mrs. Claus was a murderer. She remained undiscovered and was idolized by everyone while he knew the truth of what happened. Since then, he never believed in Christmas again. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!